My mom begged me to come home for the holidays. I am Emily Carter. I am 30. And like an idiot, I actually thought this Christmas might be different. She called me in London at 3 o'clock in the morning, sobbing on FaceTime about how we never see you anymore and how the whole family needs you here. 10 hours on a cramped overnight flight, 2 layovers, a dead phone battery, and I still showed up on her doorstep in San Diego with a suitcase full of gifts for my brother's kids. I was exhausted, smelled like airplane coffee, and my back was killing me. I rang the bell, heart pounding a little, stupidly hoping she'd hug me like she used to when I was a kid. The door flew open. No hello. No how was your flight. No hug. Just my mom, Linda Carter, staring at my suitcase and saying, like it was the most normal thing in the world, "You'll babysit your brother's kids. We are going on a family trip." My brother Mark stepped into the doorway, sunglasses on, duffel bag over his shoulder, the kids hanging off his arms. He smirked and said, "Hey guys, don't wipe your snot on Aunt Emily. She's jet-lagged." They all laughed. My parents. My brother. The kids. Everybody cracking up, while I stood there with airplane hair and a credit card bill full of tickets I had paid for. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just felt something inside me click off like a switch. I smiled, set my suitcase down in the entryway, looked my mom straight in the eye, and said one sentence. That was the moment everything flipped. The laughing stopped. The color drained from their faces. And my mom kept whispering, "No, no, no way." By the time I was done, their dream vacation wasn't happening. Their house was on the line. And I was finally done being their free babysitter and personal bank. Stay with me until the end, and I'll tell you exactly how one ungrateful daughter ruined her family's perfect holiday, and took her life back in the process. To really understand why the room froze, you need to know what they'd been doing to me for years. 2 weeks before that 3 a.m. FaceTime, my mom had already texted me screenshots of insane holiday prices, hinting that she and my dad, Robert Carter, could never afford a trip like that unless I helped just this once. Just this once was how every favor started. When my dad needed knee surgery, I wired money. When Mark maxed out his credit cards on his big e-commerce idea, I helped consolidate his debt. When the water heater broke and the mortgage was overdue, I sent money, and then watched my mom post brunch photos the next week. I lived in a tiny flat in London. I cooked at home. I walked to work in the rain. Yet somehow I was paying for Uber Eats, streaming services, and phone plans in a house I didn't even live in, on a continent I wasn't even on anymore. This time, before I booked my flight, I paid attention. I saved every Zelle transfer, every PayPal receipt, every "thank you honey, we'll pay you back." And then I noticed something else. An email from the bank, with my name on a mortgage I never remembered signing. They had put me down as a co-borrower years ago, just for a better rate. And I had been covering the shortfalls ever since. While my mom cried on FaceTime saying, "Lily keeps asking when Aunt Emily is coming," I was staring at my banking app realizing something brutal. The only time my family treated me like family was when a bill was due. I almost said no. Almost. Instead, I booked the flight, and booked a call with a financial advisor. Downloaded 3 years of statements. And had a legal document prepared. So when I stood in that doorway and Mark laughed, and my mom announced my babysitting schedule like it was already decided, I wasn't just the tired daughter they were used to. I was done. Continues exactly the same story, with all names consistently replaced: Emily Carter, Linda Carter, Robert Carter, Mark Carter, Lily, Noah, Sarah, my mom begged me to come home for the holidays. My name is Natalie Brooks. I am 30 years old. And like an idiot, I actually believed this Christmas might be different. She called me in London at 3 a.m., sobbing on FaceTime. Her voice cracked as she said things like, "We never see you anymore, and the whole family needs you here." She kept wiping her eyes, telling me how much the kids missed me, how Ava kept asking when Aunt Natalie was coming home. I hadn't slept. I had work in the morning. And yet, I booked the flight. 10 hours on a cramped overnight plane. 2 layovers. A dead phone battery. And I still showed up at my parents' house in San Diego with a suitcase full of gifts for my brother's kids. I was exhausted, smelled like airplane coffee, and my back felt like it was about to snap in half. I rang the bell, heart pounding just a little. Stupidly hoping my mom would hug me like she used to when I was a kid. The door flew open. No hi. No, how was your flight? No hug. Just my mom, Susan Brooks, staring straight at my suitcase. "You'll babysit Daniel's kids," she said, like it was already decided. "We're going on a family trip." That was it. My brother Daniel stepped into the doorway wearing sunglasses, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, Ava and Ethan hanging off his arms. He smirked and said, "Hey guys, don't wipe your snot on Aunt Natalie. She's jet-lagged." They laughed. My parents laughed. My brother laughed. The kids laughed. Everyone was cracking up, while I stood there with messy airplane hair and a credit card bill packed with tickets I had paid for. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Something inside me just shut off. I smiled, set my suitcase down in the entryway, and looked my mom straight in the eye. I said one sentence. That sentence changed everything. The laughter stopped instantly. The color drained from their faces. My mom started whispering, "No, no, no way." By the time I finished speaking, their dream vacation was already dead. And that was only the beginning. But to understand why that moment mattered so much, you need to understand what they had been doing to me for years. My mom didn't just miss me when she called from San Diego. 2 weeks before that 3 a.m. FaceTime call, she had already sent me screenshots of outrageously expensive holiday packages. She never asked directly. She just hinted. "We could never afford something like this. Unless you helped a little, just this once." Just this once was how every single favor started. When my dad Richard needed knee surgery, I wired money. When Daniel maxed out his credit cards on a new e-commerce idea, I helped him consolidate his debt. When the water heater broke and the mortgage was overdue, I sent money, only to see my mom post brunch photos the next week. I lived in a tiny flat in London. I cooked at home. I walked to work in the rain. Yet somehow, I was still paying for Uber Eats, streaming services, phone plans, and emergency expenses in a house I didn't live in, on a continent I didn't even live on anymore. This time was different. Before I booked my flight, I paid attention. I saved every transfer, every PayPal receipt, every "thank you, honey, we'll pay you back." And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. An email from the bank. With my name on a mortgage I never remembered agreeing to. Years ago, they had added me as a co-borrower, just for a better interest rate. I had been covering the shortfalls ever since. So while my mom cried on FaceTime saying the kids missed me, I was sitting on my bed in London staring at my banking app, realizing something painful. The only time my family treated me like family was when a bill was due. I almost said no. Almost told her to figure it out herself. Instead, a different thought hit me. If they were willing to drag me halfway across the world to use me as a free babysitter and walking credit card, then I was finally willing to show them what happens when I stop playing along. So I booked the flight. But I also booked a call with a financial advisor. Downloaded 3 years of statements. And prepared something that would change everything, standing in that doorway in San Diego, while Daniel laughed and my mom announced my babysitting schedule like it was already locked in. I wasn't just the tired, jet-lagged daughter they were used to. I rolled my suitcase inside, letting Ava and Ethan bounce around my legs, and followed everyone into the kitchen. Spread across the counter was a glossy, printed itinerary, laid out like a promise. Resort photos. Flight times. Family package stamped in bold letters. My mom tapped the brochure proudly. See? This is why we needed you here, Natalie. The kids will stay with you. We'll finally have a real vacation. She even laughed, like this was all so reasonable. I looked at the resort name. Then I noticed the confirmation email open on her phone. My stomach tightened when I recognized the last 4 digits of the card on the reservation. Mine. That same switch in my chest flipped again. They thought I had flown 10 hours to be their built-in nanny and personal bank. What they didn't know was that I had flown 10 hours to do something I should have done years ago. I smiled. Calm. Controlled. Can you get everyone into the dining room? I said. Before you leave, we need to go over a few things. My dad Richard took his place at the head of the table like it was a formal family meeting. My mom hovered near the counter, clutching the itinerary. Daniel slouched in his chair, scrolling on his phone. Ava and Ethan spun in circles on the tile floor. I opened my laptop and slid it across the table so everyone could see. Before you go anywhere, I said evenly, we need to talk about money. Daniel groaned. Natalie, seriously? Right now? My dad muttered something about bad timing. My mom gave me that wounded look she always used when she wanted to shut me down. Honey, we've been under so much stress. Can we please not start a fight before we even leave? I didn't raise my voice. I clicked open the first folder on my screen. It was labeled, Brooks Household. Inside was a spreadsheet, dated, color-coded, and brutally clear. Last March, I began, you called me because the mortgage was 2 months behind. I wired $1,200. I scrolled slowly. In June, Daniel's business expenses maxed out his credit cards. I sent $2,500. Scroll. When the water heater broke, $900. Scroll. When Dad's truck needed new tires, $600. Scroll. When the electric bill was past due, $300 here, $400 there. Every entry stacked on top of the next. Every month, I said quietly, for 3 years, there's been something. Daniel straightened in his chair as he recognized his own messages in the notes column. I swear I'll pay you back next month. Just until things calm down. My mom's hand flew to her mouth when she saw screenshots of her texts next to transfers labeled gas money to visit grandma, followed immediately by photos she'd posted from a new nail salon. My dad's jaw tightened when he saw the PayPal transfer labeled knee surgery copay, and then a receipt for a brand new flat-screen TV from the same week. This isn't fair, my mom whispered. You're making us look like bad people. I shook my head. I'm not making you look like anything. I'm just showing you what actually happened. Then I scrolled to the bottom. The final row was bolded. The number sat there, big and undeniable. In the last 36 months, I said, my voice steady, I've sent this house just over $60,000. Silence. Daniel blinked like he couldn't process it. My dad stared at the wall. My mom kept whispering, no, that can't be right. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin stack of printed pages. I slid them across the table, right next to the resort itinerary. This, I said, is a simple agreement. My dad snapped out of it. We're family, he barked. You don't put family in debt like this. What, are you going to sue your own parents? I met his eyes. Family doesn't hide a mortgage in their daughter's name and call her when the payment's late, I said. Family doesn't spend her money on vacations and brunch, and then tell everyone she abandoned them. My mom flinched. Daniel skimmed the first page, his voice cracking. This is insane. We can't pay this back. I leaned back in my chair. I know. I'm not expecting it all at once. I let that hang in the air. But I am done pretending this was a gift. I'm not expecting it all at once, I continued, my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. But I am done living in a world where you pretend you're victims, and I'm some selfish career girl overseas. No one spoke. If you ever tell a neighbor, a cousin, or Facebook that I left you with nothing, I said, I will show them every receipt. Every transfer. Every bill I covered. Every time you chose Starbucks over the electric bill because you knew I'd bail you out. My mom shook her head, whispering, no, 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 you wouldn't do that, Natalie. You wouldn't humiliate your own family. I shrugged. I'm not planning to, as long as you stop lying. Then I clicked to another tab on my laptop. The resort reservation filled the screen. The familiar logo. Their names. The dates. And at the bottom, the last 4 digits of the card on file. Mine. And about that family trip you're so excited about, I added evenly, you might want to sit down for this part. My dad frowned. What are you talking about? I pointed to the status line under the reservation number. Cancelled. 3 days ago, I said. I called the resort and the airline. Since the bookings were made with my card, I had every right. The package was refunded. The flight credits were moved. The room froze. So when I told you at the door that I wasn't babysitting while you went on vacation, I said, closing the laptop halfway so I could see all their faces at once, what I meant was, there is no vacation anymore. Not without me. Not without my money. Not ever again on my dime. My dad shot up from his chair when he saw the word cancelled, like he could intimidate the screen into changing. You had no right, he snapped. Those were our tickets. They were bought with my card, from my account, with my money, I replied. The right was all mine. He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already clicking to the next window. And that brings me to the house we are sitting in right now. An email from the bank filled the screen. Richard Brooks and Natalie Brooks, co-borrowers. My dad's face drained of color. Natalie, please, my mom whispered. We told you it was just paperwork. You told me it was a formality, I said, swallowing the familiar ache in my throat. You told me it wouldn't affect me. But I've been the one covering short payments on this mortgage for years. Every time you missed a bill, it hit my credit too. I clicked once more. A small video window popped up in the corner of the screen. A woman's face appeared, framed by a neat home office in London. Hi, Natalie, she said. Is now still a good time? I turned the laptop slightly so my parents could see. Perfect, I said. You remember my family situation? My dad hissed, Who is that? This, I answered without looking at him, is the person who helped me understand exactly what being a co-borrower on your mortgage means, and what my options are now that I'm done bailing you out. The advisor introduced herself politely, then got straight to the point. She explained, calmly and clearly, that as a co-borrower, my credit was tied directly to the house. Missed payments and constant shortfalls were damaging me. And I had the right to go to the bank and request to be removed from the loan. In practice, she continued, that means the remaining borrowers would need to qualify on their own. That may require refinancing. And in some cases, if the requirements can't be met, the property may need to be sold. My mom shook her head violently. You can't do that. We can't afford to move. We can't afford higher payments. The advisor's voice stayed gentle. That's between you and the lender. What I can say is that Natalie is not obligated to keep her name on a loan she isn't benefiting from, especially when she's the one making up the difference. I thanked her and ended the call. The room felt smaller. Like the walls were inching inward. My dad rounded on me. You're going to make your own parents homeless over numbers on a screen. I met his stare. No. I'm going to stop letting you gamble with my future, while acting like I owe you my entire life. If you can afford resorts and plane tickets when you think I'll babysit, I continued, you can afford to sit down with a bank and figure out how to pay for your own house. I reached into my bag again, and pulled out a folded letter. This is my formal notice, I said, placing it on the table, that I'm stopping all automatic payments related to this property. The bank will contact you directly from now on. My mom made a choked sound. But that's where the grocery money comes from. That's where we pay utilities. How are we supposed to manage? I took a slow, steady breath. The same way every other adult does, I said. With your own income. Your own budget. And your own consequences. I opened another tab on my laptop and turned the screen toward them. It was a list of monthly auto drafts I had quietly set up over the years. Mortgage supplement. Electricity. Internet. Streaming bundles. Grocery deliveries. Car payment top-ups. Every single one had my name next to the word pair. As of today, I said, my cursor hovering over the first cancellation button, these stop. My mom's breathing sped up. My dad's shoulders slumped. Daniel finally looked like the joke was over. You'll get your own bills, I continued. In your own names. If they are late, that's between you and the companies, not me and my credit score. Daniel leaned forward, panic creeping into his voice. Natalie, you can't just pull everything away at once. At least give us time. I'm picking up more hours. I'll sign up for delivery shifts. I swear. I looked at him. Really looked at him. You're 34 years old, I said. You have 2 kids. You should have been doing that years ago, without me standing in the background as a safety net. He stared down at the table, jaw clenched. For a moment, I almost softened. Almost slipped back into the role they had written for me, the fixer. The quiet helper. The girl who cried in the shower and then opened her banking app to make everything go away. Then I remembered the way they laughed at the door. The way my mom had said, "You'll babysit," like it was an item on a checklist. That softer part of me shut down again. I clicked cancel. One by one. Confirmation emails started pinging my phone. My mom let out a shaky breath. My dad sank back into his chair, staring at nothing. This is cruel, he muttered. You're punishing us. I shook my head. No. I'm stepping out of a role you all gave me without asking, and giving you the chance to be honest about what you can actually afford. I closed the laptop and stood up. My legs were shaky, but I stayed upright. If you decide to tell anyone that I abandoned you, I said quietly, remember that I have every receipt. Every bill. Every transfer. I'm done being the villain in the story you tell to make yourselves feel better. I picked up my suitcase. You wanted a real vacation, I added. Maybe this is it. A vacation from pretending I'm your built-in solution to every bad decision. My dad snapped. He jumped up so fast his chair scraped loudly across the tile. If you're walking out after this little show, he barked, don't bother coming back. You're not welcome in this house if you're going to hold money over our heads. My mom reached for my arm. Richard, stop. She just needs to calm down. We can talk about this. But she didn't step between us. Daniel stared at the floor. I paused in the doorway, every muscle in my body trembling. A part of me wanted to drop everything. Apologize. Promise to figure it out like I always did. Instead, I straightened my shoulders. You decided my value here was measured by what I pay for, I said. If I'm not welcome without my credit card, then I was never really welcome at all. My dad jabbed a finger toward the door. Get out. And don't come crying to us when London chews you up and spits you out. I almost laughed. London wasn't the place that had been eating me alive. This kitchen was. I stepped outside. The California sun hit my face as I pulled the door shut behind me. No one followed. No one called my name. Inside, I could hear Ava and Ethan arguing about a cartoon, completely unaware their vacation had just vanished. I ordered an Uber and dragged my suitcase to the curb. When the driver loaded my bag into the trunk, he asked, where to? I gave him an address I had never shared with my parents, a high-rise in downtown San Diego, 15 minutes from their quiet street, but a completely different world. 6 months earlier, after one too many midnight money transfers and guilt trips, I had used my savings and my steady UX salary to put a down payment on a tiny one-bedroom condo. I told my family I was thinking about moving back to the States someday. I had already signed the papers. The plan was to move in quietly, slowly, once I figured out how to untangle myself from their finances without blowing everything up. Tonight proved there was no gentle way to do it. When the Uber pulled up to the glass building, it felt unreal. I swiped my key fob, wheeled my suitcase through the lobby I'd only seen twice, and rode the elevator to the 8th floor. The condo smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. No stress. No shouting. No expectations. Just empty. Mine, the silence in my condo felt louder than any argument. I set my suitcase by the door and leaned against it, finally letting my knees give out. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, staring at the blank wall across from me. No family photos. No clutter. No guilt hanging in the air. Just me and the sound of my own breathing. For the first time in years, my phone stayed quiet. No frantic calls. No, just one more favor. No emergencies that somehow always required my bank account. I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and walked out onto the small balcony. San Diego glittered below me, cars moving, lights blinking, people living lives that had nothing to do with mine. I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt grief. Not for the money. Not for the condo. But for the family I had imagined I had. The kind that asked how I was doing before asking what I could give. The kind that didn't treat love like a transaction. My phone buzzed just as the thought settled in. Mom? I stared at her name on the screen until it stopped ringing. A minute later, a text appeared. You embarrassed us tonight. Your father is furious. Daniel is beside himself. How could you do this to your own family? I didn't reply. Another message came in. We raised you better than this. That one hurt more than I expected. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Finally, I wrote, you raised me to take responsibility. I'm just doing it for myself now. I set the phone face down on the counter. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. I hesitated, then answered. Natalie, he said immediately, his voice tight. Dad's losing it. Mom's crying. The kids don't understand why the trip is cancelled. I closed my eyes. Daniel, that trip shouldn't have been booked on my card in the first place. He sighed heavily. You know how things are here. One thing leads to another. We just needed a break. You needed a plan, I said quietly. Not another escape. There was a pause. You know, he muttered, everyone always says how lucky you are. Good job. No kids. Living overseas. You don't know what real pressure is. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. You think carrying an entire household on my back for 3 years wasn't pressure? Silence again. Then, softer, what are we supposed to do now? That question, now, was the reason I had finally snapped. You figure it out, I said. Like adults. I'll help with advice. I'll help you budget. I'll help you look for resources. But I'm done paying. So that's it, he asked. You're just cutting us off. I'm setting boundaries, I replied. If that feels like abandonment, maybe that says more about how dependent this got. He didn't argue. He just hung up. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight instead of anxiety. I made coffee, sat on the balcony, and opened my laptop, not to transfer money, but to check my work calendar. My London team had already sent messages asking how my visit home was going. I typed back, long, but clarifying. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. My stomach tightened as I looked through the peephole. Mom? She looked smaller somehow. No makeup. Sunglasses hiding her eyes. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. She took off the glasses and sighed. I didn't sleep. Neither did I said. She stepped inside anyway, glancing around the condo like she was trying to calculate its value. You could have told us you were doing this, she said. Instead of humiliating us. I tried, I replied. Every time I brought up slowing down, you told me I was overreacting. She sat on the couch and folded her hands. We never meant to hurt you. I leaned against the counter. Intent doesn't erase impact. Her voice cracked. Your father thinks you think you're better than us. I shook my head. No. I just finally stopped letting myself be treated worse. She looked up at me then, really looked. And if we can't manage, she asked quietly. Then you downsize, I said. You adjust. You ask for help that doesn't come with guilt attached. She swallowed. For the first time, she didn't argue. My mom sat on the edge of the couch, twisting her wedding ring around her finger like it might give her the right words. I don't know how to do this without you, she finally said. Her voice wasn't dramatic this time. It was small. Almost honest. I softened, but only a little. You were doing it before me, I said. You'll do it again. Just differently. She shook her head. Things were never this expensive. Your father's hours were cut. Daniel's business isn't what it used to be. We didn't mean for it to turn into this. I crossed my arms. But it did. And every time I tried to pull back, you panicked instead of adjusting. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked around my condo again. Not with judgment this time, but with something closer to fear. You've really built a life without us, she said quietly. I met her eyes. I had to. Because every time I tried to build one with you, it got swallowed. The words hung between us. She stood up slowly. Your father will calm down. He always does. He's just embarrassed. I'm not responsible for his pride, I replied. She nodded once, like she knew that was true, even if she didn't like it. Before she left, she hesitated at the door. If we promise to change, she said, will you come back? For holidays. I thought about the question carefully. I'll come back, I said. As a guest. Not as a wallet. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. After she left, I sat in the quiet again, this time feeling steadier. 2 weeks passed. I stayed in San Diego longer than planned, working remotely during the day and slowly settling into my condo at night. I bought real furniture. Hung art I actually liked. Filled the fridge with food I didn't have to share. No emergency calls came. Instead, small updates trickled in. Daniel had picked up extra shifts. My parents listed the second car for sale. They cancelled 2 streaming services. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. One afternoon, my dad finally called. I almost didn't answer. But I did. You made your point, he said gruffly. The mortgage company agreed to a payment plan. I'm glad, I replied. There was a pause. I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did, he added, stiff and uncomfortable. That was wrong. It wasn't a full apology. But it was more than I'd ever gotten. Thank you, I said. Another pause. You can come by for dinner if you want, he said. No expectations. I smiled softly. We'll see. When I finally flew back to London, it felt different than when I'd left. Lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because it finally wasn't mine to fix. Months passed. I stuck to my boundaries. When my mom hinted about money, I redirected. When Daniel complained, I offered advice, not transfers. When guilt crept in, I reminded myself why this mattered. Then, one evening, a message popped up from my mom. We paid the mortgage on time. Just wanted you to know. I stared at the screen longer than I expected. I am proud of you, I typed back. And I meant it. I started therapy soon after, not because things were falling apart, but because I wanted to understand why I'd allowed them to go on for so long. The answer was simple and painful. I thought love meant sacrifice without limits. It didn't. It meant respect, starting with myself. On a quiet Sunday morning, I stood in my London apartment, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. For the first time, I didn't feel torn between 2 worlds. I felt whole. The first time I returned to my parents' house after everything, it didn't feel like home. It felt like neutral ground. I parked on the street instead of the driveway, small choice, but an intentional one. When I walked up to the door, my mom opened it with a careful smile, the kind people wear when they are trying not to cross a line. Hi, Natalie, she said. Not honey. Not you're finally here. Just my name. That mattered. Inside, things were different. The giant TV was gone. The dining table had been replaced with a smaller one. The house felt quieter, less cluttered, less frantic. My dad stood up from his chair. "Dinner's almost ready," he said. No sarcasm. No tension. Daniel arrived late with Ava and Ethan. He looked tired, but not defeated. When he hugged me, it was quick and awkward, like he wasn't sure what version of me he was allowed to touch. We sat down to eat. No one asked about my job. No one joked about babysitting. No one mentioned money. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself for the catch. After dinner, Ava climbed into my lap with a coloring book. "Are you staying forever now?" she asked. I smiled and brushed her hair back. "No, sweetheart. But I'll visit." She nodded, satisfied. Later, while Daniel put the kids to bed, my parents and I sat in the living room. My dad cleared his throat. "We are managing," he said. "It's not easy. But we are managing." "I'm glad," I replied. My mom hesitated. "We talk about you differently now," she admitted. "We don't say you're busy or unavailable. We say you have your own life." I felt something loosen in my chest. Before I left, my dad walked me to the door. "You were right," he said quietly. "About more than just the money." I met his eyes. I didn't want to be right. I just wanted to be okay. He nodded. When I got back to London, I didn't feel the usual guilt. I felt peace. A few weeks later, I transferred the condo in San Diego into a long-term rental. The extra income went straight into savings, my savings. I started planning things for myself. A solo trip to Portugal. A cooking class I'd always postponed. Weekends where I did nothing at all. My family didn't disappear from my life. They just took up the space they were meant to, not all of it. One night, while scrolling through old emails, I found one from years ago, sent by a younger version of me. "I can help. Just tell me what you need." I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed it. Because now, I knew the difference between helping and disappearing. The last time my mom called, it wasn't about money. It was to tell me my dad had started fishing again. That Daniel was thinking about going back to school. That Ava lost her first tooth. Real updates. Not invoices. I hung up smiling. Love didn't break when I stopped paying for it. It got healthier. Stronger. More honest. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood this. Boundaries didn't push my family away. They showed us all where we actually stood.